You expect the moment to feel bigger. The plane lands softly, almost politely, as if even gravity behaves differently here. Outside the window, Tokyo stretches endlessly. Neat lines of buildings, quiet highways, blinking lights that don't demand attention. No dramatic welcome, no cinematic music, just movement, continuing exactly as it was before you arrived. You step into the airport, carrying everything you decided to keep from your old life inside one suitcase. The air smells clean, controlled. Even the silence feels organized. People walk with purpose. Not fast, not slow, just precise. Nobody looks around the way travelers usually do. Nobody hesitates. You realize quickly that you are the only person visibly new here. You stop in front of a ticket machine covered in Japanese characters and colored train lines that look more like circuitry than transportation. Others step forward confidently, tap cards, move on within seconds. You stand still longer than you mean to. Someone queues behind you. You feel it instantly. Not pressure, not impatience, just awareness. In Tokyo, being in the way feels louder than making noise. You press a button randomly, cancel it, bow slightly without thinking when the machine resets, even though no one is watching. A small green card slides out at last. Suica, your first tool for survival. On the train platform, nobody talks. Phones glow silently in hands. A businessman sleeps upright without moving. A student adjusts her bag so it doesn't touch anyone else. The train arrives exactly when the clock says it will, doors aligning perfectly with painted floor markings. You step inside. No one notices. Your reflection in the window looks unfamiliar. Smaller somehow. Quieter. Outside, suburbs blur into neon density as the city absorbs you without resistance. You thought moving here would feel like beginning a new chapter. Instead, it feels like stepping into a story already in progress. And for the first time, a strange thought settles in your chest. If nobody here knows who you were, are you finally free or simply invisible? The train moves forward, carrying you deeper into a life that hasn't acknowledged you yet. Tokyo reveals itself slowly, and then all at once. By evening, the city feels impossibly alive. Neon signs flicker awake above Shinjuku streets, reflections stretching across wet pavement like liquid color. Screens glow from every direction, advertisements moving faster than your thoughts can follow. Thousands of people cross intersections together, yet somehow never collide. You stop walking just to watch. Everyone else keeps moving. You realize quickly that standing still here feels almost rebellious. Hunger pushes you into a ramen shop tucked beneath glowing signs. Outside, a vending machine displays photos of meals instead of menus. Buttons, prices, Japanese text. No instructions. A line forms behind you again. You choose quickly, unsure what you ordered. A small ticket prints. The chef takes it without speaking, nods once, and minutes later, a bowl appears in front of you. Steaming, perfect, precise. You whisper, "Thank you," too loudly. The man beside you eats silently, focused entirely on the meal. No conversation, no scrolling, just eating. You copy him, suddenly aware of every sound you make. Chopsticks tapping, soup cooling, your own breathing. The ramen tastes incredible, but you're too busy learning how to exist correctly to enjoy it fully. Outside, rain begins without warning. Umbrellas bloom instantly around you, like choreography rehearsed 1,000 times. You hesitate before buying one from a convenience store, unsure if you're allowed to open it inside. You step back outside first, mimicking what others do. Every action feels like a test you didn't study for. At a konbini, the cashier bows slightly. You panic for half a second. Do you bow back? You nod awkwardly instead. Coins clatter from your hand as you try to pay quickly enough not to disrupt the rhythm of the line. Nobody reacts. Nobody sighs. The city absorbs mistakes quietly. Walking back through glowing streets, you feel something unexpected. Not loneliness, not excitement, but mental exhaustion. Tokyo is beautiful, yes, but beauty here requires attention, precision, awareness. You thought exploring would feel effortless. Instead, survival feels like observation. And as neon lights flicker across your reflection in a shop window, a question forms. Is this city welcoming you, or simply allowing you to exist within it? By the third day, you stop trying to understand Tokyo. You start studying it. You notice things you missed before. Invisible rules everyone seems born knowing. People stand on one side of the escalator, leaving the other clear. Nobody crosses the street until the signal changes, even when no cars exist. Conversations stay low, laughter contained, movements efficient. You begin watching before acting. At a crosswalk in Shibuya, you almost step forward early, then stop when no one else moves. Hundreds wait patiently beside you. The silence feels collective, agreed upon without words. When the light changes, everyone walks at once, perfectly synchronized, like water released from a gate. You follow. Your apartment introduces a new kind of challenge. Trash day arrives with rules printed in Japanese diagrams you barely understand. Burnable, non-burnable, plastic, bottles, separated by color. You spend 20 minutes reorganizing a single bag, worried a neighbor might notice a mistake. You tie it carefully and place it outside exactly where others do. Later, you check twice from your window to make sure it looks correct. Inside elevators, nobody speaks. You stare at floor numbers, unsure where your eyes should rest. A woman enters and bows slightly as she exits. You practice the motion later in your room, feeling ridiculous and strangely sincere at the same time. Your voice grows quieter without you deciding it should. You lower your phone volume. You walk faster. You apologize more, even when nothing is wrong. Words like sumimasen slip into your thoughts before English does. The city isn't forcing you to change. You're adjusting yourself to fit its rhythm. And slowly, something unexpected happens. The anxiety of standing out begins to fade. You move with the crowd instead of against it. You anticipate actions before they happen. But one evening, as you pause before entering a convenience store door, waiting instinctively for someone else to exit first, a thought unsettles you. You didn't choose this behavior consciously, so you wonder, how much of yourself can change quietly? Before you notice, you're becoming someone else. The automatic doors slide open, and you step inside without hesitation this time. Somewhere between confusion and routine, Tokyo stops feeling sharp. You wake before your alarm now, not because you have to, but because the city already feels awake. Light filters through thin apartment curtains, soft and grey, carrying distant train sounds that arrive exactly on schedule every morning. At first, the noise bothered you. Now it reassures you. You leave your apartment at nearly the same time each day. The same woman walks her small dog past the vending machines. The same cyclist waits at the corner. The same convenience store clerk nods when you enter, already reaching for a plastic bag before you speak. You don't hesitate at the register anymore. Your hands move automatically. Card tap, slight nod, quiet thank you. The train platform no longer feels confusing. You know where doors will open. You stand where space naturally forms. When the train arrives, your body adjusts without thinking, turning sideways to let others exit first. You've learned the choreography. At work, or language school, or wherever your days now anchor, conversations remain polite and indirect. Instructions are rarely explicit. People say maybe when they mean no, and silence often replaces disagreement. You nod more than you speak, learning to read tone instead of words. You apologize instinctively now, even when someone bumps into you. Lunch becomes predictable comfort, a bento box eaten quietly, scrolling less, observing more. You notice seasonal decorations changing, limited edition snacks appearing, subtle signs that time here moves through small details rather than big announcements. Rain begins one afternoon, sudden and soft. Without thinking, you stop at the entrance, shake your umbrella carefully, and slide it into a plastic sleeve like everyone else. You realize you didn't pause to figure it out. You just knew. Walking home, Tokyo feels less like a puzzle and more like a system you finally understand. The anxiety of doing something wrong fades, replaced by calm repetition. But comfort carries its own strange weight, because as you unlock your apartment door, a quiet realization follows you inside. You stopped counting the days since you arrived, and that thought lingers longer than expected. When did this stop feeling temporary?
You notice it one evening without meaning to. You're walking through the station during rush hour, thousands moving around you, and for the first time, nobody looks twice. No curious glances, no subtle awareness that you're new. You flow forward with everyone else, matching pace, turning corners instinctively, tapping your card at the gate without breaking stride. You've stopped navigating Tokyo. You're participating in it. The ramen shop near your apartment no longer feels intimidating. The chef recognizes you now, not with excitement, just a small nod of familiarity. Your usual order arrives faster than before. No words exchanged, yet something mutual exists in the routine. It feels strangely comforting. After work, co-workers invite you to an izakaya. The room fills with warm noise, laughter, glasses clinking, conversations layered on top of each other. Someone pours your drink before filling their own. You nearly forget to return the gesture, then catch yourself and laugh awkwardly. You're learning the rhythm of belonging. You understand fragments of conversation now, enough to laugh at the right moment, enough to follow stories without translating every sentence. For brief stretches, you forget you're foreign here, but the conversations never become deeply personal. Nobody asks about your past. Nobody shares too much about theirs. When the night ends, everyone bows slightly, smiles politely, and disappears into separate train lines, as if the closeness belonged only to that room. Connection here feels real, but contained. Later, walking through Golden Guy's narrow streets glowing with lantern light, you share a brief conversation with a stranger. You exchange stories in broken language, laugh over misunderstandings, and for a moment, it feels like friendship. Then they leave. No plans made, no numbers exchanged, just a memory. Back in your apartment, the quiet returns instantly. Shoes off, lights low, city humming outside your window. You realize Tokyo has accepted your presence. You are no longer an outsider disrupting its rhythm. You are part of the background now. And as you sit alone eating convenience store dessert, a question arrives gently but persistently. Can you belong somewhere without ever truly being known? At first, you thought Tokyo's quietness meant peace. Now you begin to notice the spaces inside it. Conversations remain polite, efficient, carefully balanced, but rarely spontaneous. Invitations sound possible, but never become plans. Let's go sometime, someone says with a smile, and you nod, only later realizing sometime might mean never. Nothing feels rude. That almost makes it harder. At work, laughter happens in short bursts, controlled and temporary. People share snacks, exchange seasonal greetings, discuss weather or schedules, safe topics that never risk discomfort. When the day ends, everyone leaves quickly, slipping back into private lives that remain invisible to you. You start wondering where everyone actually goes. One evening, you message someone you felt close to after drinks weeks ago. The typing bubble appears, disappears, then a polite reply arrives hours later. Friendly, distant, final. You reread it longer than you should. Walking home, the city feels different at night now. Not lonely exactly, just separate. Restaurants glow warmly behind glass windows, filled with groups laughing together. Inside trains, passengers sleep silently, heads gently swaying with movement.
each person enclosed in their own invisible world. You realize Tokyo doesn't reject people. It protects personal space so carefully that closeness must be invited, and invitations are rare. Dinner becomes quieter. You eat while watching city lights instead of conversations. The convenience store clerk still greets you warmly, but the interaction ends exactly where it begins. Predictable, polite, contained. You begin noticing how often you say "Daijobu," I'm okay, even when you aren't sure it's true. One night, you sit in your apartment listening to distant train sounds, fading into silence between departures. The stillness feels heavier than before, as if the city pauses just long enough for thoughts to grow louder. A realization forms slowly. Maybe you weren't fully accepted. Maybe you were simply accommodated, gently included, without ever crossing the invisible boundary between stranger and insider. And as your phone screen dims with no new messages, a question settles in the quiet room. Have you built a life here, or just a perfectly functioning routine?
It doesn't happen all at once. Nothing dramatic. No single moment you can point to later and say that was when it broke. Instead, small things begin stacking quietly. A misunderstanding at work leaves you nodding even though you don't fully understand what went wrong. You replay the conversation afterward, translating sentences in your head, wondering which expression you misread. Nobody raises their voice. Nobody confronts you directly. The tension exists only in subtle distance. Shorter replies, fewer conversations. You tell yourself you're imagining it, but the feeling stays. One evening you stay late, trying harder than usual, determined to prove something you can't clearly define. When you finally leave, the station feels emptier than normal. You rush through the gates just as the train doors close in front of you. You missed it. The next one arrives in minutes, but frustration hits harder than logic allows. You stand alone on the platform, watching your reflection ripple in dark glass. You're tired. Not physically, emotionally tired. Tired of translating thoughts before speaking. Tired of calculating behavior. Tired of never fully relaxing into yourself. Rain begins again, soft at first, then steady. By the time you reach Shibuya, crowds move around you like a living current. Umbrellas merge into a moving ceiling of color. Everyone knows exactly where they're going. You don't stop walking, but your pace slows. Neon lights blur slightly as exhaustion finally reaches the surface. You duck into a convenience store just to escape the rain. Warm air, fluorescent lighting, familiar music looping gently overhead. You stand in front of shelves longer than necessary, pretending to choose something. For a moment, emotion presses upward. Unexpected, embarrassing. Not sadness exactly. Something closer to release. You came here believing distance would fix what felt wrong before. But standing under artificial lights at midnight, holding a microwavable meal, a harder truth appears. Changing cities doesn't automatically change yourself. Outside, rain continues falling over a city that never pauses long enough to notice personal crises. And as you step back into the night, carrying a plastic bag that feels heavier than it should, one question refuses to leave. Did moving here heal you, or just remove the distractions hiding what was already inside? The shift doesn't arrive as a revelation. It happens on an ordinary morning, the kind you almost forget while living it. You leave your apartment later than usual, rushing slightly, mind still heavy from the night before. The air feels colder, sharper. Autumn has quietly replaced summer without announcement. Trees along the street glow faintly gold, leaves collecting neatly along sidewalks already swept clean. At the building entrance, you nearly collide with your elderly neighbour. You've seen her many times, but never spoken beyond polite nods. Today, she pauses instead of passing. She studies you for a moment, eyes warm but observant, then says something softly in Japanese you only partly understand. You hesitate. She repeats it slower, smiling, gesturing toward your jacket, half unzipped against the cold.
You laugh awkwardly, realizing she's telling you to close it or you'll freeze. You thank her, mixing Japanese and English without thinking. She laughs, not politely, but genuinely. And for a brief moment, the interaction feels effortless. No performance, no pressure to understand perfectly. Just two people sharing a small concern. Before leaving, she hands you a tiny wrapped sweet from her pocket. No explanation, just kindness offered casually, as if this moment required nothing more. You bow instinctively. Walking toward the station, something feels lighter. The city looks the same. Commuters moving quickly, announcements echoing overhead, trains arriving with perfect timing. Yet your experience shifts subtly. You notice details differently. A shop owner arranging displays carefully. A child waving at a crossing guard. Sunlight catching windows between buildings. Tokyo hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. At the station, the barista recognizes you and begins preparing your drink before you order. You realize this has happened several times now. You were simply too distracted to notice. Starting over, you begin to understand isn't a dramatic transformation. It's accumulation. Small recognitions stacking quietly until unfamiliar places begin holding pieces of you. And as you step onto the train, holding warm coffee and an unexpected sense of ease, a thought settles gently. Maybe you were never completely alone here. You just hadn't learned how to see the connections yet.
One morning, you realize you're no longer thinking about Tokyo. You're simply living in it. You walk through the station without checking signs, weaving naturally through crowds, adjusting your pace instinctively when congestion forms ahead. Your body predicts movement before it happens, stepping aside seconds before someone exits, positioning yourself exactly where train doors will open. Months ago, this choreography exhausted you. Now, it feels effortless. You notice a tourist standing frozen near the ticket machines, staring at the map with the same overwhelmed expression you once carried. Without thinking, you step closer and explain how the lines work, pointing to colors, demonstrating where to tap the card. They thank you repeatedly. You smile, slightly embarrassed, not because you helped, but because you understood. On the train, you catch your reflection again. Your posture has changed. Shoulders relaxed, movements smaller, more deliberate. Your phone stays on silent automatically. You bow slightly when exiting crowded spaces without realizing it until afterward. Tokyo has rewritten your habits quietly. At lunch, you sit alone as usual, but solitude feels different now. Less like absence, more like choice. You observe seasonal menus changing, co-workers discussing weather patterns, small rituals marking time instead of major events. You begin thinking in fragments of Japanese before translating them back. Even silence feels communicative. Walking home at dusk, you realize the city no longer feels overwhelming or distant. Instead, it mirrors you. Calm on the surface, complex underneath, emotionally reserved but deeply alive. You try remembering the version of yourself who first arrived. Anxious, hyper-aware, searching for signs of belonging. That version feels familiar, but distant. Tokyo didn't erase who you were. It slowed you down enough to notice yourself clearly. And as you pause at a crosswalk, waiting patiently even with no cars in sight, something you once questioned, a realization forms gently. You didn't just adapt to this city. You allowed it to reshape how you move through the world. The light turns green, and you walk forward without hesitation. Who were you before learning how to live this quietly? The change becomes visible on an ordinary morning. No realization announces itself. No dramatic milestone marks the moment. You simply wake up, stretch beneath familiar light filtering through your apartment window, and notice something subtle. You're not counting time anymore. Outside, the city hums softly. Distant trains, footsteps below, the faint mechanical rhythm of vending machines restocking somewhere nearby. These sounds once felt foreign, temporary. Now they feel reassuring.
You prepare for the day without hesitation. Coffee brewed automatically. Clothes chosen for weather you instinctively understand. You step outside and lock your door with the casual certainty of someone returning later, not someone passing through. At the convenience store, you exchange greetings effortlessly. The cashier recognizes you, not as a novelty, just as another regular presence in the neighborhood's quiet pattern. You walk to the station without observing everything anymore. Tokyo no longer demands your attention because it trusts your participation. You belong to its rhythm now. On the train, nobody notices you, and for the first time, that feels comforting instead of isolating. You stand balanced without holding the rail, swaying gently with movement. Announcements play overhead, words you once struggled to recognize, now blending naturally into background sound. Life here isn't extraordinary. That's what makes it meaningful. You remember arriving with expectations of reinvention, imagining a clear moment when your new life would begin. But starting over, you understand now, never arrives as a single event. It happens quietly, through routines learned, mistakes softened, familiar faces appearing gradually, loneliness reshaping itself into independence. Walking home in the evening glow, you notice how naturally your steps match the pace of others. No hesitation, no performance, just presence. Your apartment door opens to a space that feels undeniably yours. Shoes placed neatly, light falling exactly where you expect it. You pause for a moment before stepping inside, because somewhere along the way, without ceremony or announcement, Tokyo stopped being the place you moved to and became the place where your life continued. And a final question lingers softly as the door closes behind you. If you left tomorrow, would this calmer version of you ever disappear?